were to handle an unsolved murder. Now, I know we have to head purely into the theoretical realm here, don't we? Man, what is an unsolved murder? If anyone is found slain, I hope you pray for the police officers regularly in our community. Even the Barney Fifes, and they are there. But it's a rough job. Sorry, but it's a rough job. Sorry about that. It's just the way that it is. The Barney Fifes in the pulpit, too. Indeed. If anyone is found slain, lying in a field in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess, and it is not known who killed him, then your elders and your judges shall go out, and they shall measure the distance from the slain man to the surrounding cities. And it shall be that the elders of the city nearest to the slain man will take a heifer, a young cow, which has not been worked and which has not pulled with a yoke, and the elders of that city shall bring the heifer down to a valley flowing with water, which is neither plowed nor sown, and they shall break the heifer's neck there in the valley. And so the sacrifice of a young heifer, because of the death, the murder of an individual, and what it was communicating was to God and to the people that what has happened here is a capital crime as it related to that crime. And then the priests, the sons of Levi, shall come near, for the Lord your God has chosen them to minister to him and to bless in the name of the Lord. By their word every controversy and every assault shall be settled. And all the elders of that city nearest to the slain man shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken and apparently also slit. And then they shall answer and say, our hands have not shed this blood, nor have our eyes seen it. Lord, we had nothing to do with the death of this man. We don't know who did it. If we knew who did it, we would enact your justice. But we don't know, but we're innocent of this. Provide atonement, O Lord, for your people Israel, whom you have redeemed, and do not lay innocent blood to the charge of your people Israel. And atonement shall be provided on their behalf for the blood, and so you shall put away the guilt of innocent blood from among you when you do what is right in the sight of the Lord. And so it's an interesting passage. And God is reinforcing among his people that murder is a terrible, 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 terrible thing. To send another human being into eternity. It's terrible purely on the physical realm. To snuff out a life. But God sees it in the realm of the spirit also. And it's not merely the taking of a human life, the ending of a physical life, but it is the sending of a soul on into eternity. And they were never to lose sight of the heaviness of that. And so he does this. He sets this up so they would be reminded continually what a horrible thing murder is. Wouldn't be a bad thing if they set an altar out by the bus stop. Every time there's an unsolved murder that occurs within the community, no way to enact justice. They don't know who did it. We don't know who did it. But just to say as a community, God, we recognize that this is wrong, this is terrible, this is a sin against this man, and it's a sin against the entire community, and it's a sin against you, and we recognize that. And in recognition of that, we bring forth this offering because we don't want to allow those who would murder in this way to conform us after their image. We want to stay like you and see these things the way that you see them. And so murder was never to be casually handled. They were never supposed to get used to it. Never supposed to get used to it. Oh, another murder. So they proclaim their innocence here. We don't know who did it. It's interesting that they had a concern about the guilt of the whole nation as it related to innocent blood. Again, leaving its mark on a nation as a whole. It's a reflection on the nation as a whole. Another German tourist shot in New York City. I mean, they've largely abandoned Florida. You look at how the rest of the world looks at us. Barbarians. Absolute barbarians. So Wild West days. Just greater technology. And it stained our whole land. And instead of the nation being known for good people, productive people, people working hard and these things, were known as for these other things. And God knew that that would be the case, and so He warned His people that that wouldn't be the case for them. And the Lord your God delivers them into your hand, and you take them captive. And you see among the captives a beautiful woman. Now we're talking about captives not of the cities that were in the land. They were never to marry a Canaanite, but a captive of a city in the lands beyond the promised land. You see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire her, and you want to take her for your wife. Then you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and trim her nails. And she shall put off the clothes of her captivity, remain in your house, and mourn her father and her mother a full month. And after that you may go in to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. And it shall be, if you have no delight in her, then you shall set her free, but you certainly shall not sell her for money. You shall not treat her brutally, because you have humbled her. Women who were taken in war, God said among His people they were to be treated respectfully, humanely, and they were to be treated very carefully. They were not to be taken advantage of. There was to be no raping. There was to be no abusing of them. That's so common in wars. Even to this day, we haven't moved 1 inch morally, as has been witnessed to us in Europe the last few years. If they took a woman captive and one of the soldiers of the children of Israel was attracted to her, and he wanted to marry her, then he had to take responsibility for her. She was to be allowed to properly mourn. And there, to shave her head, to trim her nails. She was given 30 days to mourn, taking off the clothes of her captivity. And it would give the soldier a month to think about it. You're going to marry her. There's a responsibility involved in this. She's not mere property because of the fact that her nation or her city has been conquered. It's a human being. And so think about it before you marry her. She would shave her head, and as she would trim her nails, surely it was signs of mourning, but maybe an opportunity for the man to see her at her worst. I said maybe. You've got to notice these qualifying statements. I qualify everything when we're treading on ice this thin. I mean, there probably are women that look more attractive with their head shaved than with hair. Probably. So there's another qualifying statement. I don't know. But there was to be some room to stop and to think. She was to be allowed to properly mourn, and she wasn't to be sold. She was not to be treated brutally, even though she was taken in war. She wasn't to be treated as property. If a man has 2 wives, he's crazy. Seriously, I mean, you want to make a headache for yourself, have 2 wives. I mean, and that's not a put down as it relates to wives. I mean, you want a lousy life, have 2 husbands, I guess, too. I don't know, but I mean, can you imagine a household working through all that? No, it wouldn't. But it's interesting that God gives instruction related to this. Nowhere in the Bible does God ever condone polygamy. It's never spoken of in a positive light. But people engaged in it, and He gives instruction related to it. The Bible teaches that the divine ideal is 1 man, 1 woman for life. That's what He has in mind. That's the best way. But if a man has 2 wives, one loved and the other unloved, you see, that's the problem. And they have borne him children, both the loved and the unloved. And if the firstborn son is of her who is unloved, then it shall be on the day he bequeaths his possessions to his sons that he must not bestow firstborn status on the son of the loved wife in preference to the son of the unloved, who is truly the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength, and the right of firstborn is his. If you were the firstborn, it meant that you would receive a double portion of the inheritance. You'd get twice what all of the other sons got. But there was a responsibility associated with that. There was both the birthright and the blessing. Esau just wanted the blessing, wasn't interested in the birthright. The birthright was that the firstborn, upon the death of his son, of his father, would then take the position of spiritual oversight of the family. So there was responsibility to tend to the family, to make sure that they did okay. And God wanted that blessing and that responsibility to go to the firstborn, whether he was the father's favorite or not. The firstborn was the firstborn. And the children were not to ever be adversely or permanently impacted by the lack of health in the parents' relationship. They weren't to bear the consequences of that. The firstborn wasn't either. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who not cannot, but will not obey his father or the voice of his mother, and who, when they have chastened him, will not heed them. So here we have a stubborn, rebellious son. The parents are chastening him in an attempt to get him to obey, and to obey God's law, to obey God's standard. This is not a 4-year-old. This is an adult son that he's talking about, as we'll see in a couple of verses. This son won't even listen to the parents following the chastening. If he won't, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city, to the gate of his city. This is a son that is out of control as it relates to his family, as it relates to the household. an extreme violation of the fifth commandment to honor our father and our mother. So here he is in this kind of condition. The parents, in effect, in bringing him to the rulers of the city, said, we have done everything that we can. We've been right before God in doing it. It's His standard that we've been trying to enact in his life. It's not an issue of that he can't do it. He will not. Nothing works. He's not going to listen. He's stubborn and he's rebellious. Then he was to be brought to the attention of the elders. And they shall say to the elders of this city, this son of ours, this must have broken their heart, is stubborn and rebellious. That's his disease. And he will not obey our voice. He's a glutton and a drunkard, the symptoms of it. And then all the men of his city that he lives in, shall stone him to death with stones. And so you shall put away the evil person from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. God establishes something here to back up parental authority. Very serious. But he didn't want sons or children rebelling against the parents, and then that rebellion moving beyond the confines of the household and then being modeled before the city as a whole. It was a leaven. It was a dangerous thing. And so here, because of his age, his actions now will affect the entire city. Not just the family will be affected, but society as a whole would be affected. And because of that, the establishment, the structure of the city, the leadership was to move in and handle the situation. And so the sentence was death at the hands of the men of the city, protection of their city. The idea was that it would produce a fear in all of the people of Israel that they wouldn't follow in this man's folly. No one was free under that covenant to give themselves to sin on such a level that they no longer were the ones who were solely bearing the consequences of their sin. But now their sin is affecting a larger group. And when that happened, they were to be dealt with strongly, because we don't live in a vacuum. What we do affects those who are around us. And he didn't live in a vacuum. And if a man has committed a sin worthy of death, and he is put to death, usually by stoning, and then you hang him on a tree. They would stone a man to death and then hang him on a tree as a strong warning not to commit the same crime. His body shall not remain overnight on the tree, but you shall surely bury him that day. And so he was to be hung upon the tree as a warning against committing that same crime, but only for a day. They were not to get any perverse joy out of that. There was to be no perverse cruelty in leaving anyone up for days or weeks or months on end. God said, no, one day accomplishes the purposes, and then handle his body in a proper way. His body shall not remain overnight on the tree, but you shall surely bury him that day, so that you do not defile the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, for he who is hanged is accursed of God. So God is very, very careful. His justice is swift and strong and firm under the law of Moses. And the people who were involved in bringing forth that justice, they were to be very, very careful, again, that they didn't get a perverse joy out of it. They were not to rejoice in that kind of death either. And so, again, in all of it, God reinforcing, even in the harshest kind of laws that were necessary for that society, always protecting His people from being casual